I made a video, I think about 2 weeks ago, talking about emotional neglect based on a conversation I'd had with someone who earnestly believed that emotional abuse was something that had to be intentionally done, to make it harmful, and didn't really realize that there can be this multitude of things that can be harmful that, even if the intention is not to harm, are quite devastating for many people. This is actually even more true in that emotional neglect is the unseen form of abuse. And frankly, when we look at studies of childhood harm, emotional harm, abuse, and neglect are the most pervasive, the least studied, and frankly, given the least amount of support, in that we think, well, it's just something that they said to you that was harmful. You weren't actually physically harmed. And we don't understand that these things can be as harmful, if not more. This is especially true for emotional neglect. Now, neglect can encompass all kinds of things, but at the heart, emotional neglect is about an invisible type of harm and pain. So much so that when you're on the receiving end of it, for most of us, if especially it happened in childhood, you don't even know it's harmful. You just know that in your home, certain things didn't happen. It's essentially an abuse of what doesn't happen. And things like emotional support and validation and being seen and, teaching feelings, things like that. Really at the heart of it, though, it's being taught that your physical, mental, emotional presence and all the parts of who you are matter. But in so many homes, I think because of the historical landscape of we don't talk about feelings and things like that. I would also, as I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know the numbers on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if historically male children experience even more emotional neglect because of the dictates of society. Big boys don't cry, things like that. So even in a home where both parents are neglecting their children emotionally, I would venture to say that they probably do even more so, possibly towards their male children, by not even engaging in the conversations, and perhaps by invalidating and minimizing, stop being a baby, you're being sensitive, anything like that at all for female children, or frankly, any child in your home, because every child matters, whoever they are. But what happens is, for many people that have this, they can't really put their finger on it. They just feel deep feelings, often of loneliness and resentment towards their parents in childhood. They often just feel like no one ever really understood them. And there can just be this sense of hollowness and emotional wound and deprivation that's sort of nameless and faceless. And these are the people that will come into therapy and say, I had a fine childhood. My parents provided for me. They took care of us. They fed us. They even maybe volunteered in things or whatever. And so this is really important. So let's talk about what it looks like so you can get a kind of understanding of what the receiving end of emotional neglect looks and feels like. But really quickly, before I do that, let me just give you the definition. Emotionally neglectful parents exhibit indifference, a lack of empathy, consistent unavailability, or actively dismiss their child's emotional needs, creating a sense of isolation and invalidation. And, as I've said, one of the ways I dealt with things with my kind of eggshell parents was I would remove myself. And I spent, most of my entire childhood, if I wasn't at home, I was in my room alone, regardless of whether my parents were there or not. So, there can be this sort of this self-imposed isolation to deal with a lot of your feelings that won't be met. Or, as I said in my last video, my mom actively punished me for crying, right? And so your avoidance of that can contribute. Now, let's get into it. So the first one is essentially a lack of availability or presence, right? And so they're just not available physically, mentally, or emotionally. They're preoccupied. They have their own issues going on. They don't really make time to engage in meaningful, validating interactions with you as a kid. And, yeah, their lives might be really demanding. We know that so many parents are working so hard to put food on the table and working multiple jobs, and probably now more than ever, and even going forward, it could be, concerningly even worse. So it's not like that simple, right? It's a luxury to have a parent available to you, to have two parents available to you. You hit the jackpot if you have grown up with two emotionally empathetic, available parents. That's just the truth. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that at the heart, they can just lack empathy, right? So I should have probably said that first. At the core, they lack empathy to their child's real feelings and experiences. And they might dismiss them. They're not a big deal. Like I said earlier, you're overreacting, you're sensitive. But the real, I see you, I feel you, I get you is so powerful. I reposted a TikTok today of a creator I love. She's just so... I don't know, she's kind of kooky. I think she was as a therapist. She had a lot of childhood trauma. And at the beginning of the video, she was sort of emulating parents who were so the parent was talking to their kid and why did you do that? Get down from there. Get off this slide. I mean, not that all of us haven't had our moments. I always have to say this. But she was like, why are you talking to your kid like that? Just the way you're speaking to them day in, day out. Get down here, out of your room. What are you doing? Notice when I do that right now, I bet your hypervigilance or your nervous system has a little tick going up, maybe. That is just at the core. You're not even approaching them with empathy for the day-to-day things. Not to mention the fact, like I'm saying, we all have our moments where we might yell or lose it. This is not that, because parenting, to me, is the hardest job on the planet. And most of us are doing it alone, without partners, and even with partners. Guess who just crawled in my lap? I have to show you. Can you say hi? God, he's so cuddly, you guys. Say hi. He's purring. Did you hear that? I actually cleaned off the hair on my microphone. You'll be proud of me. Those of you who are like, oh my God. Okay, so the next thing is, I just hit the jackpot with this one. I love all my other cat. I'm obsessed with her too. She's not quite as cuddly, but she is also amazing and follows me around and cuddles in the morning only. Okay, so the third thing is there's a lot of dismissing and criticalness around, the parental dynamics. And so they belittle you, they dismiss you, they condescend and low-key mock you, or they just don't ever say, hey, I'm proud of you. You did a good job. We know that the extreme end, you're so great, you can do no wrong, can be one of the pieces of a narcissistic pattern that can be created amongst your kids. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about making an effort to be like, hey, you know what? I saw that was hard for you and you did a good job. Not you did a good job only when you get an A. This is another subtle form of harm. You only praise them when they're at the top of everything, when they got the best grade, the reward, not for their effort, not when you see them trying, not when for them perhaps a B+ is actually great and amazing. And so these are other ways they can do it. Or they just dismiss. The child brings up feelings, conversations, interests, and topics. Hey, Dad, I saw this thing on tigers, and the dad's like, yeah, we got to get to baseball. Once again, we have our moments, but this intentional, ongoing, I don't really care about what you have to offer or what you're interested in. And if you have a narcissistic parent, of course, unless it's something I'm interested in or makes you shine for me in that regard. The next one is a parent with substance abuse or mental health issues. And this is really sad because the truth is when we're deep in our own anxiety, depression, undiagnosed, untreated, or even treated struggles, we're not going to be our best, and we're humans. And hopefully you go through a period, if that happens, where you're able to then repair and renew. But the truth is that a lot of kids are living with two different parents. The parent who wakes up in the morning, who is disengaged and moody and just checking the boxes, and the parent who cocktails on wine night or the Jack, Daniels night every night at 5:00 and becomes, maybe charming and laughing and funny and gregarious, but not really present again, and or embarrasses you or says and does inappropriate things or gets angry and fights with your other parent. And so all of that is still harmful and neglectful because you are being neglected as a human being, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But so much energy is going towards that, you surviving, let's say, mentally ill or substance addicted parents, that there is no time to focus on you, not for them and not you for you. The next one is ignoring needs and boundaries. And so when you don't let your child have any privacy, when you're in everything, you go through all of their things, especially as they get older, right? You're just violating. Like I've had my kids' journals out, and trust me, there's been a part of me, especially when they've struggled, where I have wanted to read them. I'm sure I have flipped through a few of them over the years when I've been super concerned about something like substance use. But at the end of the day, I try to make an active, intentional thing to not go through their things. And this is different if your child's in serious harm and at risk. I'm not talking about that because there can be a place for that. All kids write and say and feel things that can be pretty scary and devastating too. And so sometimes when a child or especially a young person is like deep in their feelings, they can express things that if you're not part of the larger context, you don't know what's going on. And I say this as a parent who has kids who have had trauma and mental health and struggles. I'm not suggesting there's a fine, like right or wrong here, but I'm talking about parents who just in general, like they disregard the child's things, right? They expect the child to share everything with a sibling, which is just ridiculous. Like, do you want to share your favorite things with your coworker? No. I understand we have to learn to share and model, but like these kind of emotionally neglectful parents, you guys know when I talk fast, I start stuttering. They just don't really give the child a sense of separateness, or they mock it, disregard it, or actively sabotage a child's needs and boundaries. The next one is they often engage in manipulative or controlling behavior. And so they're trying to tell the child what to do and what not to do. They gaslight you, deny your reality. They shame you and guilt trip you, like I was giving that example of the way the parent talks. Everything is about getting you to comply through intentional harm, really. And they're like power tactics, whatever they are, where the child is just not, and it could be subversive, low-key manipulation. It could be overt. But at the end of the day, it's like, the child is not allowed to be a child and not allowed to have their own formation of self emerging. So what does it do to you? Let's just talk about that. What are the consequences? And at the end of this video, I'm just going to talk about one or two strategies because I know all of us have all these videos, but one or two things I think are helpful we'll get to at the end. But what does it do to you? Number one, difficulty with self-compassion. And I think most of us struggle with this. What does that even mean? It's like being able to say to yourself, it's okay, Lovey, it's okay, you did your best. And I'm talking about my own mental internal voice, like, don't be so harsh on yourself, or you are worthy of love, or you are worthy. And so you can really struggle to give yourself any sense of love and compassion. Number two, we can often be numbed out, use substances, be emotionally detached. If surviving an emotionally detached environment helped you survive, why in God's name would you become an adult and suddenly just make everything of your emotions, all of your emotions available to anyone and everyone? You're much more likely to hold your cards a bit in self-protection. So you don't really know how to experience your feelings, or you actively shove them down, or you're disconnected from them because they're often too painful. And often you don't even know how to do that, how to cultivate an inner voice or connection to self, because you were never taught that and modeled empathy and conversation and reciprocity around the emotional world. Number three, you just feel empty or hollow or incomplete inside, like there's a chunk of you missing and you just don't know what it is oftentimes. Number four, a really low sense of self and self-esteem. I say this probably in everyday sessions. I believe everyone has worthiness and shame issues. It is just about how much, how often, and what triggers them based upon your story. So it's like you just feel inadequate. You don't trust yourself. The flip side to this, I will say, is many of us who have this, as I've talked about, disorganized attachment with these eggshell kind of parents or whatever kind of parents who are high highs and low lows, is we have an anxious part, like I'm not good enough, I'll never survive, and a super highly self-reliant, independent part that really has gone through the world alone And the upside to this is we're more likely to go to dinner alone or a restaurant or travel to Paris alone or take risks. But the downside to that is that we don't know how to ask for help. We don't know when we need it. We don't trust others for help. And we kind of stay in that, that place of aloneness because we don't know how to really play with others in many regards and don't trust others in that same space. So that can be a problem. I'm working on that one. That's a big one for me, is asking for help and recognizing I literally cannot do it all. Number 5 is perfectionism, only feeling worthy when you're perfect. That's the classic inner critic and outer critic. Maybe if I'm growing up in this environment, I might think, well, maybe if I do get an A, they'll finally say they're proud of me. Or maybe if I actually get the pitching position on the baseball team, they'll finally think I'm so great. And so we're just driven. There can be workaholism and a lot of self-sacrifice, thinking that we'll finally get the love we deserve. But this becomes part of how we live our life. Number 6, a real strong sensitivity to rejection. So because we ultimately felt alone and rejected but had no words for it, once again, we're kind of scanning for any signs that someone doesn't like us, love us, care for us. And we can be highly sensitive to anything we interpret as rejection and then respond in kind. Which also reinforces the loop of not being good enough, right? Number 7, a lack of clarity regarding expectations. And so it's almost no one ever had these conversations with you or established what's right or what's wrong or how things work. And so you just don't really know about how you're supposed to approach relationships and people. And as you've been winging it on your own your entire life, it can be really hard to do. Number 8, difficulty once again with setting, holding, and keeping boundaries. Number 9, a fear of intimacy, a real fear of vulnerability. What does it really look and feel like to let somebody in? No, thank you. I don't even know how to do that. And if it gets too close, I'll bolt. Or as I've talked about, I had these multiple walls, not with my own children, but in relationships, where there was a part where I would just never fully let someone in. I think especially after my first love, right? When that heartbreak alongside my childhood, I didn't have the thoughts of, I'll be, but there was always this part where because we were so deeply alone and independent, it can be really hard for us and we often don't see it. And that can be physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, all of that. Number 10, difficulty understanding and dealing with our emotions and other people's emotions. So it's how do I feel? What do I feel? What do you feel? Or what you feel is freaking me out, so I'm not going to even ask you how you feel. That can be really common for avoidants who have that dynamic where it's if we open up your emotional box, we have to open up mine, and I don't even know or want to do that. So it can manifest in real difficulty just engaging with and entangling with emotions. So we suppress, repress them. Remember, suppression is intentional, repression is unconscious of something like that. And lastly, we can have just a lot of unresolved wounds from childhood where we feel abandoned or worthless or not good enough or inadequate or right? And we don't really necessarily know it. It's just that beneath the surface of how we live our lives is all this unresolvedness around the unidentified emotional harm because we can't name it, right? If a parent screams and yells at you when nowadays you watch a video, you can say, oh yeah, that was harmful. You shouldn't yell and scream and become volatile. That's emotional abuse. But emotional neglect, if you have a childhood where your parents were, they were generally kind, but they never fought, but, they never really said, I love you, or they said, I love you, but they didn't really show it. Or, like I said, they gave you everything. You went to good schools, you had food to eat, but no one really talked about anything. Or everything was put on one parent and the other parent was like a figure moving around the house. You can be carrying all of that and not really realize it. So what can be helpful is to first accept and identify, maybe, really do your own assessment of what happened to me? Where is the harm? Where are the places that I resonate with in this video? And then, it's easy nowadays with everything to Google. How do I fix self-esteem? How do I whatever? I'm not implying you can fix that alone through AI or books or videos, but they can all supplement and help. To me, because of course I'm biased, I've been blessed with really great therapists, and frankly, seeing a therapist for the first time in my early 20s because of my dad's self-elimination from this planet, I was just talking to one of my patients about how I became a therapist. My first, my job had been in PR. My mom had a business. I was going to do that. Had a great job in PR at the number one PR firm in San Diego. It wasn't making any money. In the 90s, we were not allowed to wear pants until Fridays. And it had to be like a pantsuit. I was doing well, but I hated it. And so having this therapeutic experience opened my eyes to what it felt like to be on the receiving end of being seen and validated, let alone doing the work. And so I do believe that therapy can be just the interaction. And all the research shows that above everything else, what matters most is that you vibe with your therapist. I cannot say it enough. They have to be obviously trained and efficient and understanding of your issues and have the clinical experience to deal with whatever you're struggling with, because it is also unethical if they don't. But the point is that you feel felt and seen. And while that cannot fully heal your entire childhood, I really believe in the power of that experience. And I know it can feel weird, like in some ways it's just about you, but in your childhood, it wasn't about you. And so it can also be really good to like not feel bad about, I don't have to ask you how you're doing, what's going on in your life. If you want to share, great as a therapist, but it can feel really good to have that focus on you because so many of you didn't receive it and you deserve it and are worthy of it. So make a list, identify the wounds, and then really do some inner child work. I'm going to post a card with an exercise you can journal about using inner child work here because it can really help you tap into who you are. And I'll screenshot it and post it from the book I used. But in essence, you use your non-dominant hand to write. So whichever one you are, left or right-handed, you use the other hand and you write or respond to prompts. So when you see what looks like a child's writing, maybe you grab a photo of yourself as well. It can be really helpful to tap into that part of yourself and learn to cultivate connection to the inner child. And as I always say, both now and in my course, which by the way is the lowest price course, it's like $79. I promise you that all of these were things that I built from my heart and I struggle to sell, but I'm telling you that cultivating an idea that you are not only your inner child, but you are your inner parent. You have to tell yourself, go to bed, it's too late. You have to tell yourself, stop eating too much or drinking too much or go do your homework or whatever for school or your job. You are both. The inner child says, no, I don't want to. And the inner parent says, no, lovey, like we need to do this, right? And so you have to work, to me, on cultivating with compassion and boundaries and love both sides or both parts or the multiple parts that you have in yourself that represent your child and adult self and every part of your story. So that's it. Thanks for being here today. And just a last note, do not tell me I can't wear my 80s sweatshirts. You can be a psychologist and be smart and have a shoulder showing. It can't be where you're judging that because frankly, it sounds a lot like what were you wearing? And if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. So don't forget that. Just have to say that because every now and then, because I love these, I got multiple of these and with my hot flashes, they're the greatest because it's cold today, but I'm going to go to Trader Joe's and I have space to have a hot flash instead of the sweatshirt up to here. Anyway, I don't have to explain it to you, but I just want to say it. Stop giving women crap for what they wear and move on to something else. We have it hard enough, and men and other humans have it hard enough as well, but we don't need to focus on the outside. We have enough problems on the inside, if you ask me. So that's what truly matters. Anyway, much love to you. Have a beautiful day. And my sweet little pumpkin, he's going to be so mad at me. Should we hear the purring again? Let's try. Are you purring? Oh. He's not purring, but he's sleepy. All right, have a good day. And I'm posting my new Substack, I promise you, tomorrow. I have been through the hardest 3 months of my life in a decade. So if I seem a little bit random here and there, or I was posting and I wasn't, 3 of my 4 kids have been in crisis. It's been a lot. So I've been in crisis because they're in crisis, but hopefully we're turning a corner. Anyway, much love to you. Have a good day. Take care. Bye.